"They'll kill me at first light," she said. So the cowboy rode straight into hell. She offered herself in exchange, not as a captive, but as a test he passed, and lost everything else. The rifle barrel pressed cold against Jake Morrison's temple before he even heard the footsteps. His hand froze halfway to his holster, fingers splayed in the dusty air of the abandoned mining office. 3 days tracking the Donovan gang had led him here, to this moment, with death breathing down his neck and his own stupidity ringing in his ears. A woman's voice cut through the silence, smooth as whiskey and twice as dangerous. "You move another inch, lawman, and your brains paint that wall." Jake's eyes shifted without turning his head. The mirror on the opposite wall showed her reflection. She was younger than he expected, maybe 25, with auburn hair tied back and eyes like green glass. Her finger rested easy on the trigger, no shake, no hesitation. This wasn't her first time holding a man at gunpoint. "Emma Donovan," Jake said, keeping his voice steady. "Didn't expect to find you here. Funny, I expected you 3 hours ago." She stepped closer, and he felt the gun barrel dig harder into his skull. "You're getting slow, Marshal." Or maybe just careless. The mining office stank of old leather and older secrets. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, streaming through broken windows. Jake's horse waited outside, oblivious to its rider's predicament. The rest of the Donovan gang was supposed to be holed up in the canyon 15 miles north. That's what his informant had sworn on his mother's grave. Another lie in a territory built on them? "Your brothers know you're here?" Jake asked. Emma laughed, short and bitter. "My brothers think I'm in Santa Fe buying ammunition. They think a lot of stupid things." "Like what? Like I'm content to play messenger while they rob and kill and build their little empire." She moved around him in a wide arc, keeping the gun trained on his head until she stood in front of him. Up close, he saw the hardness in her face, the kind that comes from watching too much violence too young. "Hands behind your head. Lace your fingers." Jake complied slowly. His badge caught the light, throwing a small star across the floor. 5 years wearing that tin, 5 years hunting men who'd rather die than swing. Emma Donovan was different, though. Her wanted poster said she'd killed 2 men in cold blood during a bank robbery in Silverton. The witnesses said she'd smiled while doing it. "You're going to walk out of here," Emma said, "and you're going to forget you ever tracked me to this town. Can't do that. Can't or won't. Same thing when you wear this badge." She studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. Not softening exactly, but changing, like clouds moving across the sun. "You really are one of the good ones, aren't you? The kind who actually believes in the law." "The law's all we got between us and chaos. The law." She spat the word. "The law didn't stop my father from being murdered over a land dispute. The law didn't punish the men who did it. The law looked the other way when they burned our ranch and left us with nothing." Her hand tightened on the gun. "So forgive me, Marshal, if I don't share your faith." Jake watched her finger on the trigger. One squeeze and this conversation ended, but something in her eyes suggested she was looking for a different ending, even if she didn't know what it was yet. "Your father was Henry Donovan," Jake said quietly. "Killed 7 years ago outside Tombstone." 3 men ambushed him on the road. Emma's eyes widened slightly. "You know about that? I know the law failed your family. I know those men never saw trial. I also know your brothers have killed 11 people since then. How many more bodies before that score's settled? However many it takes. And you? How many more before you can sleep at night?" The question hung between them like gun smoke. Outside, a wagon rattled past. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Normal life continuing while they stood in this moment balanced on the edge of violence. Then Emma did something that surprised him. She lowered the gun. "I have a proposition for you, Marshal Morrison." Jake kept his hands behind his head, not trusting the sudden shift. "I'm listening." "My brothers are planning something big. Biggest job they've ever pulled. It's going to get a lot of people killed. Innocent people." She walked to the window, keeping the gun loose at her side. "I can give them to you. All of them. Peter, Luke, and Danny. I can put them in your hands, wrapped up neat with evidence that'll see them hang." "In exchange for what?" She turned back to face him. "In exchange for me! For 1 week!" Jake's hands dropped slowly to his sides. "What are you talking about? I need to know if there's still something good in this world. Something worth not pulling this trigger. Worth not riding north to help my brothers kill whoever gets in their way." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her. They held a desperate kind of hope. the kind that knew it was probably foolish. I need someone to show me that the law, that doing right, that all of it actually means something. That my father didn't die for nothing and I haven't become something he'd hate. You want me to what, exactly? Reform you. I want you to prove that being good isn't just being weak, that men like you aren't just targets waiting to be shot, that there's a reason to choose anything other than revenge. She raised the gun again, not pointing it at him, just holding it. 1 week. You take me wherever you want. Show me whatever you want. Try to convince me. At the end of it, if you succeed, I give you my brothers and turn myself in. If you fail, I walk away and you never saw me. Jake stared at her. It was the craziest thing he'd heard in 5 years of crazy things. It was also a chance to bring down the most dangerous gang in 3 territories and maybe save one person from the path she was on. And if I say no, Emma smiled, sad and knowing, then you walk out of here and we keep hunting each other until one of us ends up dead. Probably you, if I'm honest. I'm faster than I look. She holstered her gun in a smooth motion. But I don't think you'll say no, Marshall, because you're one of the good ones. You think you can save everybody, even someone like me? Jake studied her face, looking for the trap, the angle, the play. All he saw was a young woman who'd been swallowed by violence and was reaching up from the depths, hoping someone would pull her out before she drowned completely. He'd been a marshal long enough to know this could be his death. Smart Money said to draw his gun right now and arrest her. Smart Money also said the Donovan gang would break her out before she saw trial, and a dozen more people would die in the process.
Or he could take the bet, play the hand she dealt.
Maybe lose everything. Maybe save something that mattered more than his own skin. Jake lowered his hands completely and took a step toward her. 1 week, my rules. You try to run, I bring you in. You try to contact your brothers. Deal's off. You lie to me about anything, and I arrest you right there and then. Emma's eyes lit up with something that might have been relief, or might have been victory. Hard to tell the difference in the shadows of that old mining office. Deal, she said, and extended her hand. Jake shook it. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused from hard riding and harder living. The moment their hands touched, he knew he'd just made either the best or worst decision of his life. The next 7 days would tell him which. What he didn't know, couldn't have known, was that by the time those 7 days ended, the Donovan gang would be dead, Emma would be gone, and Jake Morrison would be left holding pieces of a life that would never fit back together the same way again. But that was still ahead of them. Right now, with the sun slanting through broken windows and dust settling on their boots, they were just 2 people making a dangerous deal in a territory that ate the unwary alive. Emma grabbed her saddlebag from behind the desk. So where are we going, Marshall? Jake thought for a moment, then smiled grimly. First, we're going to visit a widow in Copper Ridge, woman whose husband your brother Peter killed last month. You want to understand the law? Start by looking it in the eye and seeing what breaks when you ignore it. Emma's face went pale, but she nodded. All right, let's go. They walked out of the mining office together, and somewhere in the hills beyond town, thunder rumbled, though there wasn't a cloud in the sky. On the second day, Jake took Emma to meet Martha Sullivan, and everything started to fall apart in ways he hadn't anticipated. The Sullivan cabin sat at the edge of Copper Ridge, a small structure of weathered wood and broken dreams. Peter Donovan had shot Martha's husband Frank during a stagecoach robbery 6 weeks earlier. Frank hadn't even been the target, just a passenger who'd made the mistake of reaching for something in his coat pocket. Peter had fired twice, and Frank had died in the dirt while the Donovan gang took $3,000 that didn't belong to them. Martha answered the door with flour on her hands and suspicion in her eyes. She was 40, maybe, with gray streaking through her brown hair and lines around her mouth that suggested she'd forgotten how to smile. 2 children played in the yard behind the house, a boy and a girl, neither older than 10. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Marshall Morrison. This is Emma. We'd like to talk to you if you have a moment. Martha's eyes narrowed. Talk about what? About Frank. The name hit her like a fist. Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment Jake thought she might close the door. Instead, she stepped back and gestured them inside. The cabin was clean but sparse. A picture of Frank Sullivan hung on the wall, a young man with kind eyes and a careful smile. Emma stared at it as they entered, her face unreadable. Martha poured them coffee without asking if they wanted any. Her hands shook slightly as she set the cups down. You here to tell me you caught them? The ones who killed my Frank? Not yet, Jake said. But we're close. Close doesn't feed my children. Close doesn't bring back their father. Martha sat down heavily. You know what the bank said when I tried to get an extension on our loan? They said Frank's death was an inconvenience, but not their problem. 3 months. That's how long I have before they take this house. Emma's coffee sat untouched in front of her. She'd barely moved since sitting down, her eyes fixed on Martha's face. Jake watched her carefully, trying to gauge what she was thinking. Her expression remained neutral, but her fingers gripped the table edge white knuckle tight. Jake said gently, "Can you tell us what Frank was like?" "Why? What good does that do?" "Sometimes it helps to remember." Martha's laugh was bitter. "Helps who?"
Not me. Not my kids.
"But," she started talking anyway, "because sometimes grief needs an outlet, more than coffee needs a cup." Frank was quiet, steady. Never raised his voice, never raised his hand. He worked at the sawmill 12 hours a day, came home smelling like pine and sweat, and always kissed me before he washed up. Said I deserved to be first, not second to soap and water. Emma's jaw tightened. He read to the children every night, Martha continued. Made up voices for the characters, silly ones that made them laugh. He was teaching our son to read, our daughter to ride. He was building them a treehouse. It's still half finished out back. I can't look at it without wanting to scream. "I'm sorry," Jake said. "Sorry." Martha's voice cracked. "Everyone's sorry." The sheriff was sorry. The bank was sorry. The preacher was sorry. But sorry doesn't make the milk appear when the cows run dry. Sorry doesn't explain to a 7-year-old girl why her daddy isn't coming home. She looked directly at Emma for the first time. "You got a family, miss?" Emma's voice came out rough. "Had one once." "Then you know. You know what it's like when they're just gone. When the world keeps spinning, but your part of it has stopped cold." "I know." Martha stood abruptly. "I have work to do. Laundry doesn't wash itself, and my boy needs new shoes I can't afford. Thank you for the visit, Marshal, but unless you're here to tell me those men are dead or captured, I'd appreciate you leaving me to my misery in peace." They left. Emma walked straight to her horse without a word and mounted up. Her face looked carved from stone. Jake swung onto his own horse, and they rode out of Copper Ridge in silence. 5 miles down the trail, Emma suddenly pulled her horse to a stop. "His name was Frank Sullivan," she said to the air. "That's right," he read to his children. "He was building them a treehouse. Emma, my brother Peter, killed him for $3,000 split 5 ways. That's $600 per man. Frank Sullivan died for $600. Her hands shook on the reins. "I knew about the robbery. I knew Peter had killed someone. But I didn't know his name. Didn't know about the treehouse." Jake guided his horse closer. "This is what I wanted you to see. The law isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about protecting people like Martha. Like those kids. It's about saying some things are wrong, period, and there have to be consequences." Emma looked at him, and her eyes were wet. "I'd helped them, you know. Not with killing, but with planning. With alibis. I told myself it was justice for what happened to our father. But Frank Sullivan had nothing to do with that. Neither did the bank clerk my brother Luke shot in Silver City. Neither did any of the others." "No," Jake agreed quietly. "They didn't." She wiped her eyes roughly with the back of her hand. "What if I can't do this? What if I can't give them up? They're still my brothers. Then we find out together if blood is thicker than right and wrong." They made camp that night by a stream, and Emma barely spoke. She sat by the fire staring into the flames while Jake prepared dinner. He'd half expected her to run, but she stayed, working through something in her head that he couldn't help her with. This was her fight, her choice. All he could do was show her the board and let her move her own pieces. On the 3rd day, they rode to visit a man named Charles Bennett. Charles was 53, rail-thin, with a limp from an old mining accident. He lived alone in a shack outside a town called Redemption, which Jake had always thought was too on the nose for real life, but there it was anyway. Charles had been the sole survivor of a Donovan gang robbery 2 years earlier. "They shot my partner right next to me," Charles said, sitting on his porch while they stood in the yard. "Gerald and I had been running supplies together for 15 years. 15 years of laughing at bad jokes and arguing about nothing and watching each other's backs. They killed him because he moved too slow getting his hands up. Just shot him and moved on like he was nothing." Emma stood very still, listening. "I dream about it," Charles continued. "Not every night now, but often enough. I dream I'm back in that canyon with bullets flying and Gerald's blood on my shirt. I dream I did something different, saved him somehow. Then I wake up and remember I couldn't. I was too scared, too slow." too human. He looked directly at Emma. You know what the worst part is? Not that I survived and he didn't. It's that I'm glad it was him and not me. I thank God every morning that those bullets missed me, and I hate myself for it. They left Charles Bennett on his porch staring into the distance at things only he could see. Emma was quiet again, but different this time. Less stunned, more thoughtful. That night she finally spoke while they made camp. I'm starting to understand what you're doing, she said. What's that? You're showing me that my brothers aren't heroes. They're not righteous. They're just men with guns who've convinced themselves that anger is the same as justice. She poked at the fire with a stick. My father would have hated what they became. What I became, you're not your brothers. Not yet, but I was heading there. Another year, maybe 2, and I would have pulled that trigger on you in the mining office without hesitation. She looked up at him. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Why are you really doing this? You could have arrested me. Could have used me as bait to draw out my brothers. Why risk your life and reputation on the chance that I might change? Jake had been asking himself the same question for 3 days. The honest answer scared him more than Emma's gun had. Because I'm tired, he said finally. Tired of chasing men to their deaths. Tired of seeing widows and orphans. Tired of being the man who shows up too late to save anyone. He met her eyes across the fire. Maybe I can't save Frank Sullivan or Gerald or any of the others. But maybe I can save you. Maybe that's enough. Emma's expression softened. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish. Probably both. She smiled, a real smile, and something in Jake's chest tightened. This was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with guns or gangs. He was starting to see Emma Donovan as more than a criminal or a project. He was starting to see her as a woman worth knowing, and that complicated everything. On the 4th day, they rode into the town of Liberty, and Jake realized he'd made a serious miscalculation. The town was hosting a dance, one of those community gatherings where everyone came together to forget their troubles for an evening. Music spilled from the church hall, fiddles and guitars mixing with laughter. Emma stared at the building like it might explode. When's the last time you did something just for joy? Jake asked. I don't remember. Then tonight, you remember. He dismounted and tied his horse. Come on. I'm not dressed for a dance. Neither am I. We'll fit right in with the honest folk. Inside, the hall was packed with people spinning and stomping to the music. Farmers and merchants, young couples and old, all moving together in a celebration of nothing more than being alive. Emma stood at the edge of the crowd looking lost. Jake extended his hand. I don't know how to dance, she said. Then I'll teach you. He led her onto the floor, and for the first time since they'd met, Emma Donovan looked genuinely frightened. Not of guns or consequences, but of this simple human connection. Jake took her hand, placed his other on her waist, and started to move. She was stiff at first, counting steps in her head, but gradually she relaxed. They spun among the other dancers, 2 strangers in a sea of familiar faces, and for those moments nothing else existed. Emma laughed when Jake spun her too fast and she nearly fell. She laughed again when they collided with another couple and had to apologize. By the 3rd dance, she was smiling like she'd forgotten how and just remembered. They danced until the musicians took a break, then stumbled outside into the cool night air, both breathing hard. Thank you, Emma said, still catching her breath. I needed that. We all do sometimes. Joy's not a luxury. It's what we're fighting to protect. They stood under the stars, the music starting up again inside, and Emma turned to face him fully. I'm going to do it. Give you my brothers. Turn myself in. All of it. Jake felt relief and something else, something complicated. You're sure? I'm sure. You were right. The law isn't about revenge. It's about protecting moments like this. Protecting people's right to dance and laugh and build tree houses for their children. She paused. But I need one more day. One more day to say goodbye to who I was. All right. One more day. They returned to camp that night, and Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted from dancing. Jake stayed awake, watching the fire and wondering what he'd unleashed. He'd succeeded in his mission, convinced her to turn on her brothers and face justice. So why did it feel like he was losing something instead of winning? The 5th day started with gunfire. Jake woke to the sound of bullets hitting trees and Emma's voice screaming his name. He rolled out of his bedroll, gun drawn, and saw them. 4 riders, coming fast through the dawn light. The Donovan gang, minus Emma. They'd found them somehow, tracked them down, and now they were coming to take back what they thought belonged to them. "Behind the rocks!" Jake yelled, and Emma sprinted with him to cover. Bullets pinged off stone as they slid into position. Jake counted the riders. 4, which meant one was missing, probably circling around to flank them. "It's Peter and the others," Emma said, her face pale. "They know. Someone must have seen us together and told them. Can you shoot?" "Yes. Then shoot." They returned fire, and the morning exploded into chaos. Peter Donovan rode like a demon, his horse charging straight at their position while his brothers provided covering fire. Jake shot twice, missed both times. Emma fired once, and her bullet took a rider off his horse. "Luke," Jake thought, watching the man tumble into the dirt and lie still. "Emma?" Peter's voice carried across the clearing. "Emma? What are you doing?" She didn't answer, just fired again. This time she hit Peter's horse, and it went down screaming. Peter rolled free and came up shooting. Jake felt a bullet graze his shoulder, hot and sharp. He returned fire, and Peter dove behind a fallen log. The fight lasted 10 minutes that felt like hours. Danny Donovan came around from the side just as Jake predicted, but Emma was ready. She shot him in the leg, and he went down cursing. That left Peter and one other, pinned behind cover and running out of options. "You're going to hang, Emma!" Peter shouted. "He's turned you against your own blood." "No," Emma shouted back. "You did that when you murdered Frank Sullivan, when you killed all those innocent people for money and called it justice." "Frank Sullivan?" Peter laughed, wild and bitter. "You're choosing strangers over your own brother, over family. You stopped being my family when you became murderers." Peter stood up then, crazy with rage, firing as he came. Jake shot him twice in the chest, and Peter Donovan fell like a tree, dead before he hit the ground. The last brother, seeing his siblings down, threw his gun and raised his hands. The fight was over. Emma walked slowly to where Peter lay. She knelt beside him, touched his face, and wept. Jake led her. This was her moment, her grief, earned through blood and choice. The surviving brother, Danny, watched from where he lay wounded. "You killed your own kin," Danny said, his voice full of hate. "No," Emma said without looking up. "They killed themselves. They just used my hands to do it. They spent the rest of the day securing the prisoners and tending wounds." Jake's shoulder needed stitches, which Emma did with steady hands and whispered apologies. Luke was dead, Peter was dead, and Danny would live to stand trial. The Donovan gang was finished, broken on the rocks of Emma's choice. That night, with the prisoners tied and sleeping, Emma sat beside Jake at the fire. She'd barely spoken since the fight, processing what she'd done, what it meant. "Tomorrow we go back," she said finally. "Tomorrow I turn myself in." "Yes. Will they hang me?" Jake had been avoiding that question. "I don't know. You've helped bring in your brothers. That counts for something. But you're still wanted for murder." "I did kill them. They were the ones who murdered my father. I tracked them for 2 years, found them in that bank, and shot them while they were robbing it. I smiled because I finally had justice. Except it wasn't justice. It was just more killing." "Was it self-defense? Does it matter?" "I went there to kill them. I succeeded. By any law, that's murder." She stared into the flames. "Funny thing is, I don't regret it. I regret what came after, the other deaths, the innocents. But those two, they deserved what they got." "Maybe," Jake said. "Maybe not. That's for a jury to decide. Will you speak for me? At the trial?" "If they let me." She nodded, accepting that. Then she did something that surprised him. She leaned over and kissed him, soft and brief, before pulling back. "What was that for?" Jake asked. "For caring. For being the kind of man who dances with criminals and thinks he can save them." Her eyes glistened. "For saving me, even if it means I hang." Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat together in silence, watching the fire burn down to embers, knowing that tomorrow everything changed. On the 6th day, they made it halfway back to civilization before Emma's horse went lame. "A stone in the shoe, simple bad luck." Jake examined the hoof while Emma stood watch over the prisoners. The horse needed rest, which meant they needed to stop earlier than planned. They made camp in a valley Jake knew, one with good water and shelter. Danny Donovan glared at them both, but said nothing. His leg wound was infected, fever starting to set in. Jake cleaned it as best he could with their limited supplies, but the man needed a real doctor soon. "We should push on," Emma said. "He'll die if we don't get him to town. He'll die if we push him. We rest here tonight, head out at first light." Emma paced like a caged animal. Something had her spooked, and Jake couldn't figure out what. They had the prisoners secure, plenty of supplies, and were less than a day from Copper Ridge, where they could hand off Danny and Emma to proper authorities. "Well, what's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing. I don't know." She stopped pacing and looked at him. "What if I run right now? Take your horse, ride hard, disappear into Mexico. Is that what you want? I want to not hang. I want to not spend the rest of my life in prison. I want to undo the last 7 years and make different choices." Her voice cracked. "But I can't. And running won't change what I did. No, it won't. So I stay. I face it. I pay for what I did."
She laughed bitterly.
My father would be proud. Or horrified. Hard to say which. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She sat up watching the stars while Jake dozed fitfully, his wounded shoulder throbbing. Around midnight, Danny Donovan started thrashing in his fever, calling out for Peter and Luke. Emma went to him, placed a cool cloth on his forehead, murmured something Jake couldn't hear. Danny calmed, slipped back into quieter sleep. When Emma returned to the fire, Jake was awake. "You were good to him," Jake said. "He's still my brother, even if he hates me, even if I helped kill the others." She sat down heavily. "Does that make me weak? Makes you human." "Human," she tested the word. "I'm not sure I've been that in a long time. You're more human than you think." They talked through the night about everything and nothing. Emma told him about her childhood, about her mother who died when she was 12, about the ranch before it burned. Jake told her about becoming a marshal, about the men he'd failed to save, about the weight of a badge and what it cost to wear it. As dawn broke over the valley, painting everything gold and new, Emma made a confession. "I'm in love with you," she said simply. "I know it's stupid and impossible and terrible timing, but it's true. Somewhere between the mining office and here, I fell in love with you, Jake Morrison." Jake's heart hammered in his chest. He'd been trying not to acknowledge his own feelings, trying to maintain professional distance. But sitting there with Emma in the dawn light, he couldn't lie anymore. "I'm in love with you too," he said. "And you're right. It's terrible timing." They kissed then, desperate and tender, knowing this was all they'd ever have. One moment stolen from the wreckage of their circumstances. When they pulled apart, both had tears on their cheeks. "What do we do?" Emma whispered. "We do what's right. We go to town. You face trial. I testify on your behalf. We hope for mercy. And if there is no mercy, then we love each other as long as we can, however long that is." Danny Donovan chose that moment to wake, saw them together, and started laughing. It was an ugly sound, full of fever and hate. "You fool," he said to Jake. "You complete fool. She's played you from the start." "Shut up, Danny," Emma said. "Why? Why shut up when it's so perfect?" The righteous marshal, brought down by a pretty face and a sad story. Peter was right. "You're weak, Emma. Always were." Jake ignored him, but the seed was planted. Doubt crept in, whispering questions. Had Emma manipulated him? Was this all part of some larger plan? He looked at her face and saw only honesty there. But doubt was a hard thing to kill once it took root. They broke camp and rode hard for Copper Ridge. Danny's fever got worse, and by midday he was delirious, rambling about things that made no sense. Jake pushed them faster, worried the man would die before they reached help. Emma rode silent beside him, her confession hanging between them like a ghost. They reached Copper Ridge as the sun was setting, and everything went wrong at once. A crowd had gathered in the town square, and Jake's stomach dropped when he saw why. Wanted posters. Fresh ones. His face and Emma's side by side with a single word printed large. Traitor. Someone had gotten word that Jake was riding with Emma Donovan. Someone had decided that made him complicit, corrupt, bought off. The territorial governor had issued a warrant for his arrest along with hers. They were both wanted now, both fugitives, both hunted. This was the plan, Emma said quietly, looking at the posters. This was what Danny meant. My brothers set this up before they came after us. If they failed, if I actually turned on them, they made sure I'd bring you down too. But how? Peter had contacts. Politicians he'd bribed, lawmen he'd paid off. He made sure that if I betrayed the gang, I'd destroy the one person trying to save me. Her voice was hollow. I've killed you, Jake. You're as dead as I am now. Jake's mind raced. They were trapped. Going into town meant arrest and likely hanging for both of them. Running meant living as fugitives forever. There was no good choice, no clean way out. Danny Donovan, still strapped to his horse and delirious, started laughing again. The sound echoed off the buildings. terrible and triumphant. Jake made a decision. He cut Danny loose, slapped the horse's rump, and watched it carry the wounded man into town. People rushed out to help him. In the confusion, Jake grabbed Emma's reins and turned both their horses away from Copper Ridge. "What are you doing?" Emma asked. "Saving both of us, or damning us. I'm not sure which yet." He kicked his horse into a run and Emma followed. "Behind them!" Shouts rose as someone spotted them. Gunfire cracked, bullets whining through the air. They rode hard into the gathering darkness, leaving behind the law, the town, everything Jake had built his life around. They didn't stop until midnight, when the horses were exhausted and they'd put 20 miles between themselves and Copper Ridge. Jake dismounted in a small canyon and immediately vomited the weight of what he'd done crushing down on him. He'd thrown away his badge, his career, his entire identity. For what? For a woman he barely knew? A criminal he'd been stupid enough to fall in love with? Emma knelt beside him, held him while he shook. When he finally calmed, she spoke softly. "We can still fix this. You can bring me in, tell them I forced you to run. They might believe you." "No. Jake, we're in this together now. For better or worse. It's going to be worse. You know that, right?"
We're gonna be hunted for the rest of our lives.
"Short lives, probably." "I know." He looked at her, saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. "But I'd rather have a short life with you than a long one without you." It was a stupid thing to say, romantic nonsense that belonged in dime novels, not reality. But Emma smiled, sad and grateful, and kissed him again. They made camp and slept holding each other, two outlaws now, bound together by love and circumstance and terrible choices. In the morning, they'd figure out their next move. For now, they just held on. On the 7th day, Jake woke to find Emma gone. Her horse was still there, her saddle, her supplies, but she'd vanished like smoke. He found the note tucked into his bedroll, written on a page torn from his journal. "Jake, I can't let you throw your life away for me. I've already destroyed too much. By the time you read this, I'll be on my way to Mexico. You can go back to Copper Ridge, tell them I escaped, that you were hunting me the whole time, show them this note. They'll believe you. You'll get your badge back, your life back. You're a good man, Jake Morrison. Too good to be dragged down by someone like me. I love you. That's why I'm leaving. Emma." Jake crumpled the note in his fist and screamed at the empty canyon. She'd left him. After everything, all the trust built and shared, she'd left. The logical part of his brain knew why. She was trying to save him, give him an out, sacrifice herself so he could live. But the rest of him didn't care about logic. He'd given up everything for her, and she'd thrown it back in his face. He mounted his horse and rode hard for Copper Ridge, the note in his pocket feeling like lead. He'd tell them what happened. Clear his name. Go back to being Marshal Jake Morrison, hunter of outlaws and believer in the law. Except when he reached town, he found the territorial marshal waiting with a dozen deputies. They arrested him the moment he arrived, rough hands yanking him from his horse, chains going around his wrists. "Marshal Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, aiding and abetting known criminals, and dereliction of duty." "I have evidence," Jake said, pulling out Emma's note. "She forced me to help her. She escaped last night." The territorial marshal read the note and laughed. "You think this proves anything? You think we're stupid enough to believe the Donovan woman just let you go? You're either complicit or the worst lawman in territorial history. Either way, you're done." They threw Jake in a cell next to Danny Donovan, who'd survived his fever and was recovering nicely. Danny grinned at him through the bars. "Told you she'd betray you. It's what we Donovans do. We survive no matter who we have to step on." Jake didn't respond. He sat on the cell's thin cot and stared at the wall, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. He'd tried to save someone. That was his crime. He'd believed that good could triumph over bad, that love could overcome hate, that mercy was stronger than vengeance. And he'd been wrong. The trial took 3 weeks. Jake was stripped of his badge and sentenced to 10 years in territorial prison for dereliction of duty and aiding a criminal. His testimony about Emma's promise to turn herself in was dismissed as lies. His claims about trying to bring down the Donovan gang were mocked. The judge called him a disgrace to the law he'd sworn to uphold. Danny Donovan testified against him, claiming Jake had been in league with the gang from the start. It was all lies, but enough people wanted to believe the worst of Jake that the lies stuck. He was transferred to the territorial prison outside Phoenix, and that's where he thought his story ended. 6 months into his sentence, a package arrived. The guards opened it, searched it, found nothing dangerous. Just a book of poetry and a letter. They gave both to Jake, who read the letter alone in his cell. Dear Jake, I'm sorry. I know those words don't fix anything, but they're all I have. I am in Mexico, living under a new name, working as a school teacher in a small village. I wake up every day thinking about you, about what we had, about what I destroyed. I left because I loved you. I know that sounds like a coward's excuse, and maybe it is, but I couldn't watch you throw away your life for me. I thought if I left, you'd be free. I didn't know they'd arrest you anyway. I didn't know my brothers had poisoned the well so thoroughly that there was no way out for either of us. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just telling you that I think of you constantly, that I love you still, that if I could go back and make different choices, I would. But we can't go back, can we? We can only go forward. The poetry book is because I remember you mentioned once that you used to read poetry with your mother. I hope it brings you some comfort in that terrible place. I hope someday you find peace, even if it can't be with me. I hope you know that what we had, brief as it was real. You saved me, Jake Morrison. Not from jail or hanging, but from myself. You showed me who I could have been, who I might still become. That's a gift I can never repay. I'm going to live a good life here. I'm going to teach children and help people and try to make the world a little less dark. I'm going to honor what you tried to teach me. It's not enough. It will never be enough to balance the scales, but it's all I can do. I love you. I'll love you until the day I die. Emma. Jake read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it between the pages of the poetry book. He didn't cry. He'd run out of tears months ago. Instead, he lay on his cot and stared at the ceiling, thinking about a woman with green eyes and a smoking gun, about 7 days that had changed everything, about the price of trying to do good in a world that punished the attempt. 10 years stretched ahead of him like a desert. He'd lost his badge, his reputation, his freedom. He'd lost Emma. He'd lost everything except the memory of dancing in a church hall and believing, for just a moment, that love could conquer anything. He'd been wrong about that, too. Love couldn't conquer bars and chains and the weight of justice. But maybe, Jake thought, closing his eyes, maybe it could survive them. Maybe somewhere in Mexico, a schoolteacher would think of him and smile. Maybe somewhere in the future, after these 10 years were paid, he'd find a small village, and a woman with different hair and a different name, but the same green eyes. Maybe. It was a thin hope, barely more than a whisper, but it was hope nonetheless. And in a cell in territorial prison, with only a poetry book and a letter for company, hope was enough. Jake Morrison fell asleep thinking of Emma Donovan and 7 days that had tested him in ways he'd never imagined. He'd passed her test, proved that good men existed, that the law could be merciful, that love was real, and it had cost him everything. But as he drifted toward dreams, he realized something. He'd do it again. Given the choice, knowing how it would end, he'd still make the same decision. Because for 7 days, he'd been exactly who he wanted to be. A man who believed in redemption. A man who chose love over fear. A man who'd seen someone drowning and reached out his hand, even knowing it might pull him under. The world had punished him for it, but the world's punishment couldn't take away those 7 days. Couldn't erase the feeling of Emma in his arms during the dance. Couldn't undo the moment when she'd chosen mercy over revenge, right over wrong, love over hate. He'd saved her in the end. Not from prison, but from becoming something irredeemable. And maybe, in some small way, she'd saved him too. Saved him from becoming the kind of man who could walk past suffering without trying to help. The kind of man who wore a badge but had forgotten why it mattered. 10 years was a long time. But Jake Morrison had learned something important during those 7 days with Emma Donovan. He'd learned that some things were worth any cost. Some people were worth any risk. Some choices were right even when they ended in disaster. As sleep took him, Jake smiled. It was a small smile, broken and bittersweet, but real nonetheless. He'd loved her. She'd loved him. For 7 days they'd been something rare and precious in a hard world. And no prison could take that away.